The most dangerous relationship is not always the one where someone controls you. It is the one where, after enough time, they no longer have to. You begin controlling yourself for them. Before speaking, you edit the sentence. Before saying no, you imagine their reaction. Before celebrating something good, you make yourself less excited. Before asking for what you need, you reduce the request. They have not told you to become smaller today. You remembered what happened the last time you were full-sized. That is how shrinking really begins. Not with one huge sacrifice, with hundreds of tiny corrections you make to yourself so the relationship can continue without friction. And eventually something frightening happens. The relationship becomes peaceful because you have removed every part of yourself that could disturb it. Now ask yourself, what exactly have you managed to keep? A person? Or a connection that only works because the real you has been slowly edited out of it? There is a difference between compromise and becoming emotionally unrecognizable. And Allah did not create another human being to become the ruler of how much of yourself you are allowed to keep. Because once love starts requiring self-reduction, the biggest danger is no longer that they might leave. The biggest danger is that they stay long enough for you to forget who you were before you learn to shrink. Lesson 1. If keeping them cost yourself, you have already lost too much. Sometimes you become so afraid of losing someone that you slowly start losing yourself. You stop saying what hurts you. You hide what you really feel. You accept things you once promised yourself you would never accept. Not because you are weak, because you care. But love should never require you to disappear. If someone can only stay when you are quieter, smaller, easier, and less honest, then they are not loving the complete version of you. They are loving the version that asks for less. And that is a dangerous price to pay for connection. Allah gave you dignity too. You can be kind without becoming powerless. You can forgive without accepting repeated disrespect. You can love someone deeply without making them the reason you abandon your own peace. Remember this, the moment you must lose yourself to keep someone, keeping them is no longer a victory. Sometimes protecting who you are is more important than protecting a relationship that only survives when you become less. Lesson 2, you cannot be fully loved while partly hidden. There is a quiet kind of loneliness that happens when someone loves you, but you know they are not seeing the whole you. So you begin hiding parts of yourself. You hide your opinions because you do not want an argument. You hide your needs because you fear being called demanding. You hide your pain because you do not want to become a burden. Eventually they may be close to you, but the real you is still alone. A healthy relationship should not make you constantly calculate which version of yourself is safe to show. You should be able to speak with respect, express what hurts, have boundaries, and still know that your dignity matters. Allah did not give you a voice so that fear could permanently silence it. And love is not proven by how much of yourself you can hide to make another person comfortable. Because if someone only loves the version of you that never disagrees, never needs anything, and never says no, then they have not yet learned how to love you completely. Real love does not ask you to hide who you are just to remain worthy of being kept. Lesson 3, stop paying for connection with pieces of yourself. Some connections become expensive in a way money can never measure. You pay with your silence, you pay with your boundaries, you pay with your peace, you pay by becoming easier to control, easier to ignore, and easier to hurt. And slowly, you begin giving away pieces of yourself just to keep the relationship alive. That is not healthy love. A relationship should not survive only because one person keeps sacrificing their dignity. There is a difference between compromise and self-erasure. Compromise says, we both adjust. Self-erasure says, I keep disappearing so you never have to change. Allah did not create you to spend your whole life proving your worth by how much pain you can tolerate. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to protect your peace without feeling guilty. Because connection is not valuable when the price is becoming a stranger to yourself. Never keep paying for someone's presence with pieces of your own identity. Lesson 4, your smallness should never be their comfort. There are people who feel completely comfortable with you only when you are smaller than you really are. They like you when you agree. They like you when you stay quiet. They like you when you never question how they treat you. They like you when you need their approval. They like you when your confidence is low enough that you will accept whatever they give. But the moment you begin standing differently, something changes. You become more confident. You begin saying no. You stop laughing at disrespect just to avoid tension. You stop apologizing for things that were never wrong. You start protecting your time. You stop explaining every decision. And suddenly, the person who was once comfortable around you becomes uncomfortable. That discomfort tells you something important. Sometimes people are not uncomfortable because you became worse. They are uncomfortable because you became harder to control. There is a huge difference. For a long time, you may believe that being a good person means making everyone around you comfortable. So whenever someone becomes upset with you, you immediately ask yourself, what did I do wrong? But sometimes the better question is, what access did they lose? Maybe they lost access to your unlimited time. Maybe they lost access to your silence. Maybe they lost the ability to speak to you however they wanted. Maybe they lost the version of you who would forgive everything without requiring change. Maybe they lost the person who is always afraid to disappoint them. And when that version disappears, they may accuse the new you of changing. They may say, you were never like this before. And perhaps they are right. You were not. Before you were afraid. Before you thought love meant endless availability. Before you thought peace meant never creating tension. Before you thought saying no made you selfish. Before you confused being loved with being easy to deal with. But growth changes that. You begin to understand that peace is not the absence of disagreement. Sometimes peace is finally having enough courage to say what has been hurting you. You begin to understand that kindness is not the same as weakness. You begin to understand that patience does not mean allowing someone to repeatedly cross the same boundary. And you begin to understand that a relationship built on your smallness was never truly balanced. Because if another person needs you to feel inferior so that they can feel secure, your shrinking will never solve the real problem. You can become quieter. You can become less successful. You can hide your intelligence. You can stop talking about your dreams. You can make yourself less visible. You can ask for less. You can expect less. You can lower every standard you have. And still, eventually, they may ask you to become even smaller. Why? Because the issue was never your size. The issue was that your strength reminded them of something inside themselves they did not want to face. This is why you must be careful when someone repeatedly makes you feel guilty for growing. Growth is not betrayal. Healing is not betrayal. Confidence is not betrayal. Having standards is not betrayal. Becoming emotionally stronger is not betrayal. You are not required to remain wounded simply because someone became familiar with the wounded version of you. You are not required to keep doubting yourself because your uncertainty made another person feel powerful. And you are not required to dim what Allah has allowed to grow inside you just because someone preferred you when you could not see your own value. There is something deeply unhealthy about a connection where one person can only feel tall when the other person kneels emotionally. That is not partnership. That is imbalance. And sometimes the imbalance can look very normal from the outside. Nobody is shouting. Nobody is leaving. Everything seems calm. But the calm exists because one person has learned to disappear. One person always gives in. One person always apologizes first. One person always changes their plans. One person always swallows their pain. One person keeps making themselves smaller so the relationship does not shake. That is not peace. That is one person carrying the entire cost of keeping things peaceful. And eventually that cost reaches the heart. You become tired without understanding why. You begin feeling invisible around the person who is supposed to know you best. You begin questioning your own reactions. You feel guilty whenever you choose yourself. Even basic needs begin to feel unreasonable. You want respect and somehow you feel demanding. You want communication and somehow you feel needy. You want honesty and somehow you feel difficult. You want consistency and somehow you feel like you are asking for too much. This is what happens when someone becomes comfortable with your smallness. Your normal needs begin looking enormous because the relationship was built around you needing almost nothing. My dear brother, my dear sister, do not confuse another person's comfort with Allah's command for you. Islam teaches humility, but humility does not mean believing you are worthless. Humility means knowing that everything good within you is from Allah. It does not require you to allow people to humiliate you. There is a difference between lowering the ego before Allah and lowering your dignity before people who misuse your heart. You can be humble and still know that disrespect is wrong. You can forgive and still create distance. You can love and still say this cannot continue. You can wish someone well and still refuse to become smaller so they can feel bigger. In fact, sometimes the most honest thing you can do for a relationship is stop pretending that everything is fine. Because as long as you keep shrinking, the other person may never have a reason to examine themselves. Your silence protects the pattern. Your boundaries expose it. That is why boundaries often reveal more than arguments. When you finally say no, watch what happens. A healthy person may not always like your boundary, but they can learn to respect it. An unhealthy person often treats your boundary like an attack. Why? Because they were benefiting from its absence. This is important. When someone becomes angry because you finally protect something they were taking advantage of, Do not immediately assume your boundary is wrong. Examine it carefully. Be fair. Be kind. Do not become harsh simply because you are learning to stand up for yourself. But do not throw away a healthy boundary just because another person does not enjoy it. Sometimes their discomfort is simply the feeling of losing control they should never have had. You were not created to become somebody's emotional furniture. Always there, always available, never speaking, never needing, never changing, never taking up space. You are a human being. You will grow. Your priorities may mature. Your relationship with Allah may deepen. Your standards may become clearer. Your understanding of yourself may change. And the people who genuinely love you will learn to meet the growing version of you. Not perfectly, not without adjustment, not without difficult conversations. But they will not need your destruction to preserve their comfort. They will not secretly wish for your confidence to disappear. They will not punish you for becoming stronger. They will not repeatedly remind you of the weaker version of yourself because that version was easier for them to manage. They will make room. And sometimes that is one of the clearest signs of healthy love. It makes room for who you are becoming. So do not reduce yourself to preserve a connection. Do not hide every beautiful thing Allah is developing within you. Do not become ashamed of becoming disciplined, confident, wise, or emotionally healthy. And never believe that becoming smaller is proof of love. If the relationship requires one person to keep disappearing, something is wrong. You can be gentle without being invisible. You can be loving without becoming powerless. You can be humble without allowing humiliation. You can protect another person's feelings without sacrificing your entire identity. Remember this carefully. Your smallness should never be the price of another person's comfort. Someone who truly values you will not need you beneath them in order to stay beside you. Lesson 5. The fear of losing them can make you abandon you. Sometimes the person does not abandon you first. Sometimes fear makes you abandon yourself before they ever leave. That is what makes the fear of losing someone so dangerous. It does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it appears in tiny decisions. You want to say no, but you say yes because you are afraid they will pull away. You are hurt, but you say it is okay because you are afraid honesty will create distance. You need an answer, but you stop asking because you are afraid of seeming difficult. You notice something is wrong, but you silence your own instincts because you do not want the relationship to end. And every time this happens, fear teaches you the same lesson. Keeping them is more important than keeping yourself. At first, it may seem like love. You tell yourself, I am just being patient. I am just trying to understand them. I do not want to lose something good. I can handle this. But over time, your fear begins negotiating with your dignity. It says, accept this one thing. Then stay quiet about this one thing. Then forgive this again. Then do not ask too many questions. Then maybe your standards are too high. Then maybe you are the problem. And one day you look at yourself and realize you have spent months or years protecting a relationship while nobody was protecting you inside it. This is why attachment requires wisdom. Loving someone is beautiful, but making someone the center of your emotional survival is dangerous. Because when your heart begins believing, I cannot be okay without this person, fear gains enormous power over you. Now every disagreement feels like a threat. Every moment of distance feels like disaster. Every change in their tone makes your mind race. You begin studying every message, every pause, every reaction, every small shift. Not because the relationship is necessarily ending, but because your peace has become dependent on their presence. And once your peace depends completely on another human being, you may do almost anything to stop them from leaving. That is where self-abandonment begins. You stop asking whether the relationship is good for your heart. You only ask whether the relationship will continue. Those are not the same question. A connection can continue and still be destroying you. A person can remain physically present while your confidence disappears. A relationship can last many years while your dignity slowly dies inside it. Longevity alone does not prove health. Sometimes people stay because they are afraid to leave. Sometimes they remain because the unknown feels more frightening than familiar pain. And sometimes we hold on to what hurts because at least the pain is known. But Allah did not tell you to make another person your source of security. Human beings change. Human beings disappoint. Human beings leave. Human beings die. Only Allah remains. This is why the heart becomes unstable when it places the weight of its entire safety on another creation. No human being was designed to carry that weight. When your heart remembers that Allah is the one who sustains you, protects you, guides you, and knows what you cannot see, something inside you becomes steadier. You may still love the person. You may still fear losing them. You may still cry if the relationship ends. Faith does not make you emotionless, but faith can stop fear from becoming your master. You can say, I love you, but I will not disobey Allah to keep you. I care about you, but I will not destroy my dignity to prevent you from leaving. I want this relationship, but I will not make it my God. That is strength, not coldness, not arrogance, strength. Because there are moments when keeping another person will require you to betray your own conscience. And that is when you must remember what fear makes you forget. Not everyone you lose is a loss. Sometimes Allah removes what you were too afraid to release. Sometimes a door closes because you had become willing to destroy yourself just to keep it open. Sometimes the thing you call heartbreak is the beginning of rescue. You may not understand it immediately. At first it may simply hurt. You may wake up wanting them back. You may remember the beautiful moments. You may question whether you were too strict. You may blame yourself. You may even feel tempted to return to the same pattern because loneliness makes old pain look softer than it really was. This is why you must remember the full story. Do not remember only the person. Remember who you became around them. Were you peaceful? Could you speak freely? Could you be honest? Did your relationship bring you closer to Allah or repeatedly pull you away? Did you feel respected? Were you allowed to grow? Were your needs always treated like problems? Did you become afraid of their reactions? Did you constantly feel responsible for their moods? Did you have to keep proving that you deserved basic care? These questions matter. Because sometimes you are not missing the relationship itself. You are missing the hope of what you wanted the relationship to become. And those can be two completely different things. You may have loved their potential. You may have loved the rare good days. You may have loved who you thought they could become. You may have loved the future you imagined together. And because that imagined future felt so beautiful, you kept paying for it with the present version of yourself. But a future should not require you to repeatedly betray the person you are today. Do not trade your current dignity for a promise that someone may eventually treat you properly. People can change, yes. We should leave room for repentance, growth, and improvement. But hope must not become an excuse for endless harm. You are allowed to look at patterns. You are allowed to pay attention to repeated behavior. You are allowed to say, I love who you could become, but I have to live with who you are choosing to be right now. That sentence can save years of confusion. Fear also makes you overvalue being chosen. You begin thinking, if they leave, maybe nobody else will want me. If this relationship ends, maybe I will be alone forever. What if this was my only chance? But do you realize what fear is asking you to believe? It is asking you to believe that your future is trapped inside the decision of one human being. That is too small a view of Allah. One person's rejection cannot close every door Allah can open. One person's inability to value you does not remove your value. One relationship ending does not mean your story has ended. And even if Allah does not replace that person with another person immediately, He may replace the chaos with peace. He may replace confusion with clarity. He may replace emotional dependence with strength. He may replace endless waiting with direction. He may return you to yourself. And sometimes that is the replacement you needed first. The fear of losing someone becomes especially powerful when you have already invested a lot, years, memories, plans, sacrifices. Maybe you defended them. Maybe you waited for them. Maybe you gave them chances nobody else would have given. Then the mind says, I cannot leave now. I have already given too much. But giving more does not recover what was already lost. If you discover you are walking in the wrong direction, the answer is not to keep walking because you have already come far. Sometimes wisdom is turning around, not because the past meant nothing, but because the future means something too. You cannot change what you already gave, but you can decide what you will continue giving. You can decide that the next year will not look like the last one. You can decide that love will no longer require constant fear. You can decide that you will stop chasing people who use withdrawal to control you. You can decide that if someone threatens to leave every time you express a need, you will stop allowing that threat to govern your behavior. You can decide that your heart belongs to Allah before it belongs to anyone else. This does not mean becoming hard. Please understand that. Healing from self-abandonment should not turn you into someone who abandons others too quickly. Do not become careless with people's hearts. Do not run from every difficult conversation. Do not label every disagreement toxic. Relationships require patience. Marriage requires compromise. Friendship requires forgiveness. Family requires mercy. But healthy compromise has movement from both sides. Healthy patience still has dignity. Healthy forgiveness does not require you to pretend the wound never happened. And healthy love does not use your fear of being left as a weapon. You can be loyal without being trapped. You can forgive without surrendering your judgment. You can love without handing another person complete authority over your peace. And you can say, if you choose to leave because I finally asked for respect, then I will be hurt, but I will survive. That is a powerful moment. Because fear loses some of its control when you realize that losing them may hurt, but losing yourself hurts too. And unlike losing another person, self-abandonment follows you everywhere. You carry it into your sleep. You carry it into your prayer. You carry it into the mirror. You carry it into every new relationship. So protect yourself before fear teaches you that love requires self-betrayal. You do not have to become fearless overnight. Courage does not mean you stop caring whether someone stays. It means their staying is no longer more important than your obedience to Allah, your dignity, your truth, and your emotional health. Let people stay because they value the real you, not because fear trained you to become impossible to leave. Remember, the fear of being abandoned should never become the reason you abandon yourself first. Lesson 6. The right person will not compete with your growth. Pay attention to what happens when you begin becoming better, not richer, not more popular, better. You become calmer, more disciplined, more confident, more serious about your faith, more careful with your time, more honest about what you want, more willing to walk away from what harms you. Growth changes relationships because growth changes what you tolerate. And this is where some people reveal what they actually loved about your presence. A person may say they love you, but what happens when you no longer need them in the same unhealthy way? What happens when you stop chasing? What happens when your confidence returns? What happens when you build a life that does not revolve around getting their approval? What happens when your relationship with Allah becomes more important than pleasing them? Do they celebrate your growth, or do they begin fighting the person you are becoming? That question can reveal a lot. Some people are comfortable supporting you while they believe you will remain beneath them. They encourage you, but only to a certain point. They tell you to be confident, but not confident enough to challenge them. They tell you to succeed, but not so much that your success changes the balance between you. They tell you to heal, but once healing makes you stop tolerating their behavior, suddenly your healing becomes a problem. That is not support, that is permission with conditions. And genuine love should not feel like someone handing you permission to become yourself. The right person will not need your weakness to feel important. They can feel needed without making you dependent. They can advise you without controlling you. They can love you without reducing you. They can walk beside your growth rather than standing in front of it. This does not mean the right person will agree with every decision you make. Healthy love is not blind approval. Someone who loves you may challenge you. They may tell you when you are wrong. They may warn you when your confidence is becoming arrogance. They may tell you when an ambition is harming your priorities. They may remind you of Allah when the world begins distracting you. That is not competing with your growth. Sometimes that is protecting it. The difference is intention and pattern. A person who cares about your growth wants you to become better even when your improvement makes you stronger and more independent. A person who competes with your growth wants improvement only when it does not threaten their position. That difference matters. Imagine someone who prayed for you when you were struggling. You finally begin succeeding, and now every achievement is met with a strange silence. You share good news and they immediately reduce it. You become excited and they find a reason to make you doubt yourself. You start feeling confident and they repeatedly remind you of your old mistakes. You become happier and suddenly they accuse you of changing. Not every uncomfortable reaction means jealousy. People have their own struggles. We should not read evil intentions into every small behavior. But repeated patterns deserve attention. If your growth constantly creates hostility in someone who claims to love you, you should ask why. Love should not need you to fail. Friendship should not need you to stay insecure. Marriage should not need one person to stop becoming better so the other person can remain comfortable. And family love should not require you to remain forever trapped inside an old version of yourself. Sometimes people freeze you in the role they first knew. Maybe you were the one who always needed help. Maybe you were the one who never spoke up. Maybe you were the forgiving one. Maybe you were the child everybody could command. Maybe you were the friend who was always available. Maybe you were the spouse who always gave in. Then you grow, and suddenly the old role no longer fits. This can create tension because the relationship now has to change too. Healthy people adjust. They learn the new version of you. They may need time. They may make mistakes, but they do not spend all their energy trying to force you back into your old shape. They allow the relationship to mature. This is one of the most beautiful things about healthy love. It is willing to meet you again as you grow. Because none of us remain exactly the same. 10 years from now, you should have learned something. You should have developed. You should understand Allah differently. You should understand yourself differently. Your priorities may become wiser. Some of your old dreams may disappear. New responsibilities may arrive. Your wounds may heal. Your character may deepen. And someone who loves you cannot demand that you remain the same person forever just because that version was easier for them. True companionship requires meeting each other again and again, not physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. It means asking, who are you becoming? What matters to you now? How can I support what is good in you? What do we need to change so we can continue growing together? That is partnership. The opposite is competition. Competition sounds like, why are you doing all this? You think you are better than us now? Who put these ideas in your head? You never used to say no. You have changed. And sometimes your answer should simply be, yes, I have changed. Not every change is good, but not every change is bad either. Growth often requires becoming unfamiliar to people who benefited from the old you. Perhaps the old you tolerated disrespect. The new you does not. Perhaps the old you needed constant reassurance. The new you trusts Allah more deeply. Perhaps the old you chased attention. The new you protects your peace. Perhaps the old you was afraid of solitude. The new you would rather be alone than poorly accompanied. That change should not embarrass you. It should make you grateful. Allah may be teaching you through every season. And when Allah is removing unhealthy attachments from your heart, do not fight the lesson because someone else misses the version of you who was easier to control. There is another form of competition that is harder to notice. Sometimes a person does not compete with your success. They compete with your relationship with Allah. You begin taking prayer more seriously. You want to stop certain habits. You want to avoid certain environments. You want to become more careful with what is lawful and unlawful. And someone makes you feel embarrassed for it. They call you extreme for basic obedience. They make jokes about your changes. They pressure you to return to behavior you are trying to leave. They behave as if your spiritual growth is stealing you away from them. This requires courage. Anyone who truly loves you should want your relationship with Allah to become stronger. Because the closer you become to Allah, the better your character should become. More honest, more patient, more merciful, more responsible, more aware of your duties. If your growth is genuine, it should not turn you into someone proud and cruel. It should make you better. And the right people will recognize that. They will not ask you to move backward spiritually just so the relationship can remain easy. Allah comes first. That principle protects the heart from many forms of manipulation. When you know Allah comes first, you stop believing that another person's displeasure automatically means you are wrong. Sometimes people become displeased because obedience changed your boundaries. You may stop participating in something. You may stop certain conversations. You may change your environment. You may choose modesty, discipline, or distance from something unhealthy. And the people accustomed to the old version of you may resist. Be gentle. Do not become self-righteous. Do not treat others as if you are spiritually superior. But do not return to what harms your faith simply because your growth makes someone uncomfortable. A relationship worth keeping should not require you to become less pleasing to Allah. There is also a beautiful side to this lesson. When you meet someone who does not compete with your growth, appreciate them. When someone reminds you of your potential without making you feel inadequate, appreciate them. When someone celebrates your progress without needing credit for it, appreciate them. When someone tells you the truth because they want you to become better, appreciate them. When someone is not threatened by your confidence, appreciate them. When someone can watch Allah open a door for you and genuinely say, I am happy for you, protect that connection. Those people are rare gifts. Be that person for others too. Do not ask Allah to increase your friend and then become jealous when he does. Do not pray for your spouse's success and then punish them when success arrives. Do not encourage someone to become strong and then resent them when they stop depending on you for everything. Love should not be a cage disguised as care. Love should help people become more truthful versions of themselves. Ask yourself, when the people I love grow, do I feel threatened? When they become confident, do I try to humble them unnecessarily? When they succeed, do I suddenly search for flaws? When they set a healthy boundary, do I treat it like rejection? When they need me less, do I fear that I matter less? Sometimes we are not only the ones being reduced, sometimes we are the ones doing the reducing. And growth requires honesty about both sides. Maybe someone's independence makes you anxious. Maybe you learn to feel valuable only when someone needed you. Maybe their growth makes you fear being left behind. If so, do not punish them for growing. Grow with them. Strengthen your own relationship with Allah. Build your own purpose. Deal with your own insecurity. Love them enough not to make them responsible for keeping you emotionally comfortable at the cost of their potential. This lesson is not simply about finding the right person. It is about becoming the right kind of person too. Become someone who can celebrate another person's light without feeling that your own has become smaller. Become someone who can say, Allah blessed you and I am grateful to see it. Become someone who encourages goodness without needing to own it. Become someone whose love creates room. Because the healthiest relationships are not built by two people desperately trying to keep each other small. They are built by two people who can grow without turning growth into a competition. You do not need to outrun one another. You need to help one another move toward what is good. So when you evaluate a connection, ask yourself one simple question. Does this person love me enough to let me become better? And then ask the harder one. Do I love them enough to let them become better too? The right relationship does not require either person to lose themselves. It gives both people space to mature while protecting respect, faith, mercy, and responsibility. Remember, the right person will not compete with your growth. They will not need you to stay wounded so they can continue feeling important. Lesson 7, sometimes losing them is how you get yourself back. There are endings that feel like your life is falling apart. And only later do you realize something else was happening. You are being returned to yourself. At first you do not see it. All you see is the empty place. The missing messages, the silence, the plans that will never happen, the routines that suddenly have nobody inside them. You remember what they said. You remember what you said. You replay the ending. You wonder what you could have done differently. You may even ask Allah to return the person to you. Because when someone has occupied a large part of your emotional world, losing them can feel like losing part of your identity. But sometimes that feeling reveals exactly what went wrong. You became so connected to them that you stopped knowing where they ended and you began. Their mood became your mood. Their approval became your confidence. Their attention became your peace. Their absence became your anxiety. Their opinion became the mirror through which you saw yourself. So when they leave, the first feeling is not freedom, it is emptiness, because you have to meet yourself again. And perhaps you have not spent time with that person in years. You have to remember, what did I enjoy before I became obsessed with keeping this relationship alive? What did I want? What did I believe? What did I stop doing? Which friendships did I neglect? Which dreams did I put away? Which boundaries did I break? Which parts of my personality did I hide? When did I start asking permission to be myself? These questions hurt, but they also open doors. Because grief can become a mirror. It can show you how much of yourself you gave away. And once you see that clearly, healing becomes more than getting over someone. It becomes coming home to yourself. Maybe you start praying with focus again. Maybe you sleep without waiting for a message. Maybe you laugh without wondering whether someone will judge you. Maybe you wear what you like within your values. Maybe you reconnect with family. Maybe you call the friend you kept ignoring because all your energy was going into one person. Maybe you pick up a goal you abandoned. Maybe you sit alone one evening and realize the silence does not frighten you as much as it used to. These moments may look small, but they are signs. Pieces of you are returning. There is a reason some endings feel lighter only after the grief passes. While you were inside the relationship, you were too busy maintaining it to notice how exhausted you had become. You were managing moods, predicting reactions, choosing words carefully, explaining yourself, fixing misunderstandings, giving another chance, waiting for change, trying to become easier to love. Then the relationship ends, and suddenly the work stops. The heart still hurts, but another feeling begins appearing beneath the pain. Relief. That relief can confuse you. You may think, if I loved them, why do I feel lighter? Because love and exhaustion can exist together. You can love someone and still recognize that the relationship was costing you too much. You can miss a person and still know that returning would mean becoming smaller again. You can pray for someone and still accept that they should not have access to you anymore. These truths can exist at the same time. Healing is not always learning to hate the person who hurt you. Sometimes healing is being able to remember them without needing to return. That is much stronger. Hatred can keep you emotionally tied to someone too. You still wake up thinking about them. You still organize your life around what they did. You still need them to regret losing you. You still imagine the day they see your success. You still want them to suffer enough to understand your pain. That is not freedom yet. Freedom arrives when your life no longer needs to become a message to them. You are not healing to make them jealous. You are not succeeding to make them regret leaving. You are not becoming beautiful, strong, disciplined, or happy so they can see what they lost. You are healing because Allah gave you a life that still deserves to be lived. That is enough. One of the strongest things you can do after losing someone is stop performing your recovery for them. Do not turn your future into revenge. Let your future belong to you and to Allah. There is something else you must understand. Getting yourself back does not mean returning to the person you were before the relationship. You are not going backward. You have learned too much. You have felt too much. You have seen parts of yourself you did not understand before. So healing is not returning to the old you. It is building a wiser you. A person who still loves deeply, but notices patterns sooner. A person who still forgives, but does not use forgiveness to avoid difficult decisions. A person who still believes in love, but no longer worships being chosen. A person who can be generous without giving away every piece of themselves. A person who can say no without shaking for 3 days afterward. A person who can survive being misunderstood. A person who understands that being alone for a season is better than becoming invisible inside a relationship. This version of you may have been impossible to build while you were desperately trying to keep someone. Sometimes separation creates the space growth needed. That does not mean every relationship must end for you to grow. Good relationships can become places of enormous growth. But when a relationship repeatedly requires your self-erasure, sometimes distance is the only place where you can finally hear yourself again. And perhaps more importantly, hear Allah again. Because unhealthy attachment can become noisy. Your dua becomes, please let them stay. Please make them choose me. Please make them change. Please bring them back, again and again. Until eventually Allah may teach you a different dua. If this is good for me, keep it with goodness. If it is harming my faith, my heart, or my future, give me the courage to accept what you know. That is a different kind of prayer. It is no longer trying to control the outcome. It is asking for guidance within the outcome. And that takes trust. Because sometimes Allah's protection does not look like receiving what you wanted. Sometimes it looks like surviving its removal. You thought you needed them to be okay. Then months pass, maybe years, and you discover something beautiful. You are still here. You are praying. You are laughing. You are building. You are learning. You are sleeping peacefully. You are creating plans that do not include them. You are becoming someone you could not imagine during the heartbreak. That does not make the past meaningless. It means the past did not get the final word. Some people leave your story after teaching you something you could not learn while they stayed. Maybe they teach you where your boundaries were weak. Maybe they reveal how easily fear can make you accept less. Maybe they show you how desperate you had become for approval. Maybe losing them exposes how far you moved away from Allah while trying to keep another human being close. The lesson can be painful without making the person evil. Not every relationship ends because someone was a monster. Sometimes two people are simply unable to build something healthy together. Sometimes timing matters. Sometimes maturity matters. Sometimes values are different. Sometimes damage has become too deep. Sometimes a person can have good qualities and still be wrong for your life. This is important because people often remain trapped by one thought, but they are not a bad person. They do not have to be a bad person for the relationship to be bad for you. A person can be kind in many ways and still repeatedly disrespect your boundaries. A person can have a good heart and still be emotionally unable to give you what a healthy relationship requires. A person can love you and still not know how to love you well. Love alone does not automatically create compatibility, safety, maturity, or respect. That understanding can free you from the need to turn every ending into a war between a hero and a villain. Sometimes the lesson is simply, we could not keep this without losing too much of ourselves. And then you release it. With sadness, with prayer, with dignity. There will be moments when you want to go back. This is normal. Familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar freedom. When you feel lonely, your mind may begin editing the past. It removes the nights you cried. It removes the disrespect. It removes the confusion. It removes the promises that were broken. And it plays only the beautiful scenes. Be careful. Memory can become a skilled editor when the heart is lonely. So when you miss someone, do not ask only, did I love them? Ask, who was I becoming while I was trying to keep them? That question brings the whole picture back. If you were constantly anxious, hiding, apologizing, shrinking, begging for basic care, or losing connection with Allah, remember that too. Do not romanticize what required your disappearance. You can honor the good memories without returning to the old pattern. You can be grateful for what was beautiful and still protect yourself from what was harmful. And if Allah brings reconciliation, let it be based on real change, not loneliness. Real change has evidence, accountability, consistency, humility, different behavior. Not simply another emotional promise after the pain of separation becomes uncomfortable. Because sometimes people do not miss you. They miss access to you. They miss your attention. They miss how quickly you forgave. They miss the version of you who had no boundaries. So if someone returns, do not only listen to what they say, look at what has changed, and make dua for clarity. Your heart deserves more than another cycle. There is something powerful that happens when you finally stop chasing the person who left. All the energy that was running toward them begins returning to you. You start building again. You remember your responsibilities. You take care of your body. You take care of your mind. You reconnect with worship. You learn how to sit in silence. You discover that solitude is not always rejection. Sometimes solitude is where Allah rebuilds what attachment broke. And slowly you stop asking, how do I get them back? You start asking, how do I never lose myself like that again? That question changes everything. Now your goal is no longer to become irresistible to another person. Your goal is to become rooted in faith, rooted in dignity, rooted in self-respect, rooted enough that love can enter your life without becoming your entire identity, rooted enough that someone's presence can add to your life without becoming the definition of it, rooted enough that if someone walks away, you grieve, but you do not disappear with them. This is what it means to get yourself back. It is not becoming selfish. It is becoming responsible for the person Allah entrusted to you, yourself, your heart, your choices, your faith, your time, your future. You cannot control who remains. You cannot force someone to understand you. You cannot make someone value what they have decided to overlook. You cannot love another human being into emotional maturity, but you can decide that nobody's presence will again require your disappearance. And one day, you may look back at the person you were trying desperately to keep. You may remember how convinced you were that losing them would destroy your life. Then you will look at the peace Allah built afterward, the strength, the clarity, the restored friendships, the deeper faith, the standards you finally learned to protect. And perhaps you will understand you were not only grieving a person, you were also giving birth to a version of yourself that could no longer survive inside that old pattern. Sometimes that is why letting go feels like dying before it feels like freedom. An identity is ending. The version of you who begged, the version who chased, the version who believed being chosen was proof of worth, the version who accepted less because loneliness frightened them. That version is slowly being buried, and something stronger begins standing in its place. Not harder, stronger, not colder, clearer, not incapable of love, finally capable of loving without disappearing. That is the goal. Not to become someone who never needs anyone. We all need companionship. We need family, friendship, marriage, community. Love is part of being human. The goal is to stop needing someone so desperately that you are willing to betray everything valuable inside yourself to prevent them from leaving. Love should meet you as a whole person. And you should meet the other person as a whole person too. Two people walking together, not one person slowly vanishing inside the other. So if you are grieving someone today, do not rush your heart. Do not force yourself to pretend it meant nothing. Take your pain to Allah. Grieve with dignity. Learn, heal. Return to the parts of your life you neglected. Repair your relationship with yourself. Repair your relationship with Allah. And understand that an ending is not always proof that you failed. Sometimes losing someone is the first moment you finally stop losing yourself. Sometimes the door that closes behind them opens a room inside you that you had forgotten existed. And sometimes, after all the crying, all the questioning, and all the fear, you realize you thought losing them would leave you with nothing. But losing them gave you back the one person you had been abandoning for far too long, yourself. That is why you should never become smaller just to keep someone. Because the love meant for you should not require the death of the person receiving it. Keep your softness, keep your kindness, keep your ability to love, but keep yourself too. And if someone can only remain when you become less than who Allah is teaching you to become, then perhaps their leaving is not the end of your story. Perhaps it is the moment you finally begin living it as yourself. Do not measure love by how much of yourself you can sacrifice to keep it alive. The people meant to walk beside you should not require you to become smaller, quieter, or less complete. Protect your heart, protect your dignity, and keep growing toward the person Allah is calling you to become. Because anyone who truly belongs in your life should be able to love you without asking you to disappear.